Phil. I'm so glad that you're here with me today on the Courage of a Leader podcast. I know that one of your many talents and part of the work you do with your clients is helping them to enhance and develop their culture. Why is that a focus of your work? Why is that important? Um, yeah, what are your clients getting out of that work?
Well, Amy, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, spending some time with you. And, it's the background I have is in the wholesale distribution side.
Yeah.
And, we just called on other businesses and you start to see, why does business A always do well? And why does business B always struggle?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see, what are those foundational elements that are or are not in place?
Yep.
And the most successful organizations I've seen are those that are really clear on two things: where they're going, vision, and how they're going to get there, culture.
Ah,
And the ones that, the quote by one of the management gurus is, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
I
You've
was
heard
thinking of that as you were
that.
talking about, yeah,
And,
A
you know,
versus B. Yeah.
right. And it's so true. You could have the best plan, you could have the best vision. If you don't have a culture to support it, and I don't have very many guarantees, but I have this one, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
Recently, I had a half day workshop with a group of 50 attorneys, and they had all come from larger firms because they left toxic environments.
Okay.
Well, now, as they grew, multiple cities, multiple attorneys, some of that toxicity was starting to leach into the organization.
Okay.
And they had never sat down as a group to really get serious about it. So we took the morning and, narrowed down what were the most important components to them of a successful culture. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is great. We're in. I said, great. We had this big whiteboard going. I said, fine. Now come and sign your name up here that this is what you're going to do now. This is what you're going to live by. And it's like, oh, I have to commit. Yes, each one of you needs to come up and sign this. Then we went around the room and said, okay, based upon this discussion, starting right now, what are you going to do different?
Mm,
And we logged all of those comments and all of those observations that people made, because it's not just talking about it. It's like you walk into organizations and you see, they'll tell you, oh, we're a big family here. Really? Then why is there a revolving door?
yeah.
Why are you not hitting targets?
Yeah.
Because you're saying A and doing B.
Yeah.
And my goal with clients is to get them talk and walk on a parallel line,
Yes. Yes.
whatever that line is.
Yeah. Which requires translating the cultural values, what you say are the most successful components of your culture, into mindsets you engage in, into behaviors that you engage in on a day-to-day basis. The importance of your question, what will you do differently?
Yes.
How is this going to show up day to day?
Well, and there was a situation with one of the major partners who was not at the meeting. And I knew from other conversations that that was not a real good situation.
Okay.
And I followed up with the main partner a week and a half later. And well, when we went around the room, said, okay, what are you going to do? He said, I know what I need to do, without spelling it out. But I could see a few heads bobbing. And I called a week and a half later, and it wasn't a real fun conversation because the day before he had let that other partner go.
Ah,
But again, putting up, if this is the way you're going to do, you can't just talk it.
yeah.
Because one thing is I try to impress upon clients is, if you can find all this, but culture is really what you tolerate or allow.
Yes.
So you can define it all and put the fancy words up on the wall and you can recite them and everybody knows them. But if it really boils down to what are you living?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the serious part of the organizations that do it. The level of engagement for that group of people goes way, way up.
Yeah.
I've worked with a number of clients over the years, um, and everybody needs to hire right now. I mean, I'm
Yep.
sure you see it with your everybody's looking for people, but it's not just people that have a skill, background. Do they fit your culture?
Yeah. Do they align with your core values?
Yes.
Yeah, very critical. Oh, it was really showing up in a conversation I was having with a leader earlier today. Like the tolerating and the allowing is going on, right? And she's nice, right? She doesn't want to be too harsh. And it's like, but what is the impact on the group, right? On the work? So Phil, you told us, I love this about having all of those attorneys in the room sign the most successful components of their culture and identify what they'll do differently. I'd like to ask you the opposite question. How do these conversations get started? Because I feel like so many leaders get overwhelmed about this. Yeah, I don't know that we're totally clear on our vision. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're totally clear on what makes our culture effective, what we want our culture to look and feel like. How do we get started? What's the beginning
Well,
of that meeting look like?
you already hit the nail on the head. They say, I'm not sure. Or I'll say, okay, look, if
Yeah.
I was working with, I was brought into a firm, I was working with a couple of their people, and I kind of finagled a audience with the CEO. So let me ask you a question. I said, I've heard about you that if you see a new employee, you see an intern, you go pull up a chair
Oh,
and you go talk with them.
yeah.
And then I've heard about your CFO, and I know why you brought him in, but your CFO, his first words on Monday morning is, where's my report? So if I walk around, I'm going to break a coaching rule. I'm going to ask you a two-part question.
Okay.
If I walk around and ask people, what's the culture around here? How many different answers am I going to get? And part two, how many answers should I get? And
Hmm.
he takes out his little notebook and starts making notes. You know, that's the thing about the culture. You should be, and your people should be very clear.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you take it down into an organization,
Hmm.
you have to bring it down and have conversation with everybody at every level so they can get an understanding of what it means to them at their level so they can play along.
Yeah.
If you just give them the, well, here's what we've come up with, and it's numbers 1 through 5, and that's fine. But if you don't explain how you got there and what, and again, it's like you go to the dictionary, what we used to go to a dictionary, but you're going to see, 2, 3, 4, 5 definitions for a word.
Yes.
Well, we need one.
Yes.
And in a group of 50 people, we can't have 50 variations of a core value. We need
Yeah.
one that we agree this is how we define this.
Right. Right. What do we mean when we say teamwork?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you say conversations with everybody. Right. I mean, and in big organizations, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting 2,500 people in the same conversation or 50,000 or whatever it is. Right. But you're bringing people together. What do you see? What does it mean to you? How does this translate to your day to
Exactly.
day? Right. Okay. This is what we mean by teamwork. How do you demonstrate that in your interactions, given your job responsibilities?
Well, and you know what? The same thing applies, Amy, to the vision.
Mm, yep.
If you want them to buy into that as well, if you want them to engage, you got to, again, bring it down to their level.
Yeah.
I worked with a 500-person county government years ago. And in their so-called vision statement, which was too long because they had too many board members and they all had to get their little words. But maximize resources, which is fine for the executive director. That's money, that's people, that's buildings.
Yep.
What
Yep.
about the lowest level person in the organization? And so we did. We had those conversations with those people, talked about their job and how it fits in. And then they understood that they could take process one, two, and three and combine those into one
Mm,
instead of three. And now they understand maximizing resources. They were resourced, but we brought it down to their level. So they said, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I can play.
yes. Yes. Oh, you've already said so many great things, Phil. Let me tell the listeners a little bit more about you. Phil Gafka is a recognized leadership speaker, executive coach, and business consultant. Capitalizing on his experience as CEO of two successful companies and as a certified business coach, Phil focuses on executive coaching, leadership development, and strategic business planning and culture development, as we are talking about today. Phil has spoken to a wide range of organizations, ranging from Audi, Jackson National Life Insurance, and the National Kitchen and Bath Association. His first book is entitled Hole in One Leadership: Nine Secrets to Mastering the Game of Leadership Greatness. That was published back in 2019. And he is now working on the next book. So the first book covers the front nine of the golf course, if you will. And now he's working on the back nine, transitioning to that next part of your leadership journey. Glad to have you here, Phil. You've already said so many great things about prioritizing our cultural values. So, I think you were just alluding to it. You can have 50 people with 50 different answers, right? And sometimes when we start to talk about what do we want our culture to look like, we want it to be this and that and this and that and this and that. How do you get leadership groups? How do you get employees and organizations to prioritize?
You're basically surveying the room. What's important to you?
Yeah.
And we had, fortunately, a very large whiteboard, and we wrote down everything.
Yeah.
We had 60 some, we'll call them core values.
Oof, yeah.
And that's great. I said, okay, what is it? Oh,
Everyone's
it's like,
heard. That's great.
yeah.
But now
I
you've
said,
got
okay,
60.
right. I said, okay, now we're done. Just memorize these and your life will be good. No, then the next part of the process is I just pick on people in the crowd and say, okay, Amy, pick any two on the board
Mm,
and let's decide between those two which is the more important of the two.
okay.
And some are very easy.
Yeah.
And then we take the next person and say, okay, you pick two.
Mm,
And we're crossing one off each time.
okay.
And the first couple are real easy. Then we get into interesting discussions, which
Hmm.
is back to that point of now they start defining what they mean by those terms via this conversation of this core value versus this core
Okay. Now,
value.
yeah, we're finding out what do they mean by teamwork? What do they mean by collaboration? Okay, teamwork is actually speaking more to us. We're going to cross this one out.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we
Great.
just did this until we took it down to what turned out to be the Elite Eight.
Okay.
Because it's kind of that NCAA March Madness process. You keep bracketing down till you get to your winners.
We can get to the finals. Yeah.
Exactly. All I'm doing is facilitating. It's their conversation. They're talking to one another. And then we vote. And majority rules. And eventually, again, you whittle this down to, the most important things. Now, what's interesting is the things that we're crossing off don't go away.
Yeah.
It's just being replaced by something that's more important.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell a new employee or an existing employee, here's our 67 core values.
Yeah, I mean, even with eight, we had this exploration with a leadership development group in a program I'm leading not too long ago. They have they call them something different, but they're their core organizational values, and they can come into conflict with one
Yes,
another very easily, right? There could be quality versus teamwork or inclusiveness versus responsiveness. And okay, in different situations, where is it important to weigh
yes.
one more than the other? Or how can you bring both together in the best way? It can get tricky.
You work with clients on that. The way you use that vision statement and your core values, these are your North Stars. When there is a situation,
Yeah.
now we're going to use these and
Yes.
refer back. Does this decision, does this action support or not?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, and that's really when you start to use these tools that you put in place. Companies that are entrepreneurial, it's like always, there's always another shiny object. Let's go chase this one. No. Does the shiny object support the vision of where this organization wants to go? Yes or no?
Yes.
If it does, then there's probably a good chance you should do it. If it doesn't, probably a good chance you should not be wasting your time on that shiny object.
Yes.
And the same thing for those core values. Do you violate yours or not? Yes or no? Some of these get really simple answers. Maybe not comfortable answers, but pretty simple answers.
Yeah. 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 So I'm feeling like there is the getting really clear about what are our prioritized core cultural values. And then there's, okay, don't take that pretty package and put it on a shelf.
Right.
How do we use it for guidance? How do we use it for decision making? Are we talking about this in our team meetings and our one-on-one touch bases in how we're going to do work when we're improving processes? Right? We're tying it to
Yes.
the values and like the companies that do it well, it gets embedded in their
Yes.
language and in their processes.
And it's not about accountability. I
Yeah.
mean, it is, but that's only part of the process. You know, you calling me out and saying, hey, Phil, I think you crossed the line here. That's you holding me accountable. The place you want to get to, ownership.
Ah,
Hold yourself accountable. What do you do when nobody's looking?
yeah.
Are you doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And when you get to that place, it's a beautiful moment. It really is.
Right. And knowing that you have this ownership and you're doing what you know to do throughout your days as any employee in that company to live the cultural values. And you had an exchange with someone else and you didn't feel like teamwork was present in that, calling that out, right? Like, I am not feeling teamwork right now.
Right.
How can we do this differently? How
Exactly.
powerful.
And, those are the organizations that just always do better. It's not
Yeah.
a perfect situation. There's no perfect,
No.
but it's about that true commitment and being really honest and living what you said you were going to live.
Yeah.
And there's no one set of core values.
Yeah. Oh,
It's the
no. Yeah.
one that works for that organization that they're going to commit to and they're going to own.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the best type, but this is popping into my head right now, Phil. I have a business partner that says, "We don't like to say practice makes perfect. We like to say practice makes permanent." We're not going to live the values perfectly. We've already talked about how sometimes there's tension between them,
Yes.
and it's hard to uphold them all to 100% or whatever that looks like. But instead, you're engaging with it and you're talking about it. And you're like, okay, I think we can achieve this. I don't know. Do we need to sacrifice a little bit here? Like, how can we possibly do this the best way that we can in this moment?
Well, that brings up a golf quote because I just
Oh,
happen to
good. Yeah.
tie golf and leadership together. But I think it was Annika Sorenstam who said, "We don't practice till we get it right. We practice till we can't get it wrong."
Ooh, that's powerful too.
And if you put that kind of effort in,
Yeah.
you're going to do pretty darn well.
Yeah. All right, I want to ask this question, Phil. So, if a team leader, a mid-level manager is listening to this podcast episode and they're thinking, well, all right, I'm not in charge of like starting this whole cascading conversation in my organization. what can they do to influence the kind of culture that they and they know their team wants to have?
Great question. Um, I'll give you an example. I worked with an organization, 50 people. They interviewed everybody in the organization.
Okay.
And then they had their leadership team get together. We started working on their culture. During the process, I got a call from two of their, higher level people that they'd been talking. They go, we want to have this conversation with you. We don't think that the people at the very top are really buying in. And I said, so what? I said, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You can't control what those people are, but in your level, at your place, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Don't shirk off that responsibility. Leaders go first.
Love
And I
it.
don't think that was the answer they were expecting. But that's when I work with clients, I talk in terms of multi-directional leadership. In an org chart, people that are underneath you, there is a certain style or level of leadership, but it's also different than what you do at a peer level. And it's also very different from what you do leading up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a leader, that is your job.
Yeah.
And you have to go first. It's like when a CEO, you see the news item that the CEO is going to retire. And then in the same article, say, well, these are the two or three people that are the heir apparent. How do you get on that list? I'm sure that those heir apparents aren't waiting for someone to tell them what to do.
Ah, yeah. They're using their influence. They're,
Yes, they're doing it.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's the point. If you're going to assume that role of leader, then assume it, own it.
Yeah. What leadership is needed here? How can you, with your strengths and skills and approach and experience, put it in? So I'm hearing use your influence,
Well,
right?
learn how to use your influence.
Mm,
The tough part is, if you're going up the ladder, it's not real easy to tell, boss, you're doing this all wrong. Let me tell you how to do this better. Okay, it's probably not going to get a warm reception.
right.
But I think as people learn the power of a really good, provocative question,
Yeah.
the kind of question that you kind of want to say it on your way out the door because you don't want an answer. You just want to plant the seed. You want the other person walking away going, I got to think about
I want you to think about this one
that. Right.
for a bit.
So you want somebody to reframe their thinking. And the way you do that, I think, is asking a really good question.
And if you've got a team, right? If there are employees that are reporting directly to you, are you going to launch those conversations around, hey, these are organizational values, or what do we want to be our department's values, and how do we
Yes,
demonstrate those day to day, and get engaged in creating the kind of culture that you know is going to allow you to get to your vision, right? What your group needs to accomplish.
exactly. Exactly.
Oh, I love it. Phil, you have said so many great things today. Let me recap some of these so that listeners have got them. Foundational elements: where are we going, the vision, and then the how do we get there, which is the culture. And you want to have conversations with everybody about what are our most successful cultural components, and get down to the level where everybody sees how it applies to their job. Right? How do I have that line of sight? How do I impact the vision? And how do I demonstrate the cultural values every day? I circled this over here in my notes, Phil. It's like, what do you tolerate and allow? I think a great inquiry for every leader out there. Are we calling out? Are we doing something about those behaviors that aren't aligned with the culture that we want? And you're winning the culture game when people have ownership, right? They're really feeling that ownership. It's embedded in your processes, in your language day to day. And every leader out there, Well, this challenge, this invitation. Leaders go first, right? How can you use your influence? Ask the provocative questions, right? Translate those values into your day-to-day operations. Any final words, Phil? So much great stuff you've shared with us already.
Well, I mentioned to you earlier in our other conversation, I've got a couple of speaking engagements coming up in the fall, and I found a good close.
Okay.
And the close is you ask the audience, what's the difference between a good general and a great general?
Mm,
And the good general says, charge. And the great general says, follow me,
okay.
because leaders go first.
I'm going to charge. Come along.
Come along.
Thank you so much for your time today, Phil. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Amy, thank you for the opportunity. Always enjoyed the chat with you, young lady. Thank you very much.
Yes, I feel the same. Thanks, Phil.